Tramel, and I say the game of the day in college football Saturday is in Lubbock, Texas.
I'm going a little bit further west. I'm saying Nebraska and Washington. From the Opelco Studios in Oklahoma City, you're watching the Press Row. I'm Jenni Carlson. Barry, some pretty good games again this week. It's not the monster Saturday we saw a week ago, but there's some pretty good games on this docket.
Some great games. I think there's 10 games involving 2-0 teams. My favorite's in Lubbock, though, because it's a conference game. Texas goes to Texas Tech. You've got the return of the Longhorns to Lubbock for the first time since the Michael Crabtree 39-33 game of 08 that sparked such controversy. You've got Tommy Tuberville's first true test replacing Mike Leach. You've got the, this is a huge game for Texas. If the Longhorns lose in Lubbock and lose in Lincoln in mid-October, they could win in the Cotton Bowl and still not win the South. This is a huge game for Texas and for Tommy Tuberville. I'm going to, all eyes should be on Jones Stadium down in Lubbock.
I think it's going to be a great game. It's a night game, which they'll give plenty of time for people in Lubbock to really get fired up about that game. I'm going to be looking, though, at that Nebraska-Washington game pretty close. Nebraska, looks like they may have turned a little bit of a corner offensively. This is really going to be, I think, their first true test on Saturday. And Washington's not great, lost in the opening week to BYU, so this is not a fantastic Washington team, but clearly one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Jake Locker. It's going to be a big test for Nebraska's defense. And Barry, I think this could go a long ways to telling us where Nebraska is really, as we talk about, their chance to maybe win the Big 12 North, which I think is pretty high, but then maybe to really contend in the Big 12. I think this is going to be a really telling game for that fact alone.
Oh, I agree, and I think Washington much improved under Steve Sarkisian. Done an excellent job there. I think this is a game that does show what kind of a national stage Nebraska belongs on. Because, they played very well down the stretch last season, but before that, sort of bumpy ride. Not easy to win in Seattle. A lot of teams, USC went to Seattle and lost last year at the beginning of their slide. So I think that's a huge game. Another game that fascinates me, Arkansas, Georgia in Athens. Mark Richt could go 0-2 in the SEC. Phenomenal coach, had a great record, but always seems to be a little bit on the bad side of Georgia fans. He goes 0-2 in the SEC. It's not going to be a good year for Georgia.
Yeah, and I think Georgia right now is, they're trying to find center a little bit. A.J. Green's been out, been suspended, and that's an ongoing situation. So Arkansas they've obviously Ryan Mallett taken over at quarterback. I think they like what he's doing offensively there, but clearly going to Georgia is going to be a huge test for Arkansas. That's, as Barry mentioned, an SEC game, so really important conference-wise. A couple out-of-conference, non-conference type of matchups that I'm really looking at, Barry. Clemson at Auburn. Auburn, I think, wins this game, but Clemson, that's going to be a tricky test right there.
Well, Clemson has not played that well on defense so far against bad competition, but the ACC is wide open, and Clemson is ready to step into that void. Clemson has not won the ACC in 29 years. It's time for Clemson to win that dang league. It's not a great league. Clemson's always got a good program. It's time they won that. One way you can do that is to show your might. You go to Auburn and win, and you've saved some face for the ACC. It won't be easy, though. Auburn's got a good, solid defense. Cam Newton is a rising star quarterback, but that's definitely one to keep an eye on. And finally, the Notre Dame-Michigan State game. Brian Kelly, on the cusp of getting the Irish to 2-0, loses at home to Michigan in a heartbreaking fashion. Now, if he loses to the Spartans, all of a sudden the shine is off his star early in Brian Kelly's Notre Dame era.
Yeah, and Notre Dame's got to go to Michigan State, and so that's always a tough place to play. And Michigan State traditionally is always pretty good early in the season. They've had some fall-offs towards the end of the year, but they always seem to have it going early on, and no doubt this is going to be a huge game for the Spartans, a huge game for their fans. I've got Michigan State winning this game, Barry, which, is probably not going to be music to anybody's ears if you're a Notre Dame fan. But I think that this is going to be a tough test for Notre Dame. I think they're on the rise. I think they're headed in the right direction. But you don't turn those corners overnight. And I think that's a game worth watching because I think it could go either way. But clearly, a lot of people will be watching to see Notre Dame get on that winning track. Hey, stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.